Hey guys, my name's Pocket and welcome back to League 101. Today we're going to be talking about Lulu. Now Lulu is one of my favorite supports right now. She's an enchanter with a focus on shielding and attack speed, but she also has some offensive capabilities and some healing. This makes her incredibly versatile and that's probably one of the best reasons to play her right now. As usual, this is a 101 guide, so we're going to go from the absolute basics all the way up to the niche tips and tricks that are really going to help you master Lulu. I'll put timestamps in the video description if you want to hop around to anything specific, and we're just going to get straight into it. So to start, we're going to go over Lulu's abilities, and we're going to talk a little bit about what she's good at and what she's not so good at. Lulu's passive is Pix. Pix is Lulu's fairy companion who assists Lulu when she uses auto attacks. When Lulu uses a basic attack, Pix will send out 3 bolts that deal magic damage, and this magic damage scales a tiny little bit with AP, but mostly it's based on level. Unlike auto attacks, however, these bolts have unit collision. That means that if you attack a unit that's behind another unit, these bolts will be blocked by that unit, dealing damage to the first unit you hit rather than necessarily the thing that you've actually auto attacked. Pix, however, is a little more than just empowered auto attacks. And for that reason, we're going to talk about Lulu's E next rather than her Q, because that's going to help you understand some of the interactions that we're going to see. Lulu's E is Help, Pix. This ability can be cast on both allies and enemies, but it has a different effect. When cast on an enemy, Lulu sends Pix to the target enemy for 4 seconds. This deals magic damage, and the enemy is also revealed while Pix is attached to them. On an ally cast, Lulu sends Pix to the target ally for 6 seconds. This can actually be cast on any allied unit, including minions, but if you use this on an allied champion, then it will also shield them for 2.5 seconds. At least on the face of it, this seems like a fairly simple ability. Cast it on an enemy to do damage and reveal them, cast it on an ally to shield them. However, some of you might be wondering, why can I cast this on an allied minion if it doesn't shield them or seem to have any effect whatsoever? Well, if you remember those 3 bolts that Pix fires when you use auto attacks, they will actually be directed at the target from wherever Pix is. So when you're auto attacking with Pix on yourself, these empowered bolts are following your auto attack. But if you use Pix on an ally that's, say, to the right of you, then those bolts will be coming from that ally and therefore have a different angle. This also has an interaction with your Q, which is what we're going to talk about next. Lulu's Q is Glitter Lance. Both Lulu and Pix fire a magic bolt towards the target point. This magic bolt deals magic damage to the first enemy that it passes through, and every enemy after that takes a reduced 70% damage. It also slows everybody that is hit by 80% that decays over 2 seconds. Now, just like your auto attacks, because this Q is also being fired from Pix, there are actually 2 bolts, and the second one will come from wherever Pix is. This leads to a few fun little interactions, as well as some fairly important considerations that we're going to talk about as the video goes on. But for now, it's just important that you remember that these Q bolts can come from both you and Pix. An important thing to note here is that if an enemy happens to be hit by both of these bolts, then they can only take full damage from 1 bolt. This means that if they took the full damage by being hit first by the first bolt, then the second hit will refresh the slow, but it won't do any damage. If they took reduced 70% damage by being hit second or after from the first bolt, then the second bolt will do a maximum of 30% damage, bringing it up to the full 100 damage if you're hit by both bolts. Now, to some people at least, this can seem a little confusing, but I promise you it's really not that difficult to get to grips with, so just hop in the practice tool, give yourself Q and E, put down a couple of allied and enemy target dummies, and just start firing Qs off and you'll understand it pretty quickly. Lulu's W is Whimsy. Just like your E, this can be cast on both allies and enemies, but it has a different effect depending on who you choose. On enemy cast, Lulu launches a spell at the enemy champion, polymorphing them into a harmless critter. The polymorph target is disarmed and has their base movement speed reduced by 60. On allied cast, Lulu instantly casts Erratic Magic. This gives your ally both bonus attack speed and bonus movement speed. The bonus attack speed granted depends simply on the ability level, but the bonus movement speed scales with your AP. Now, the duration of these effects both scale with the ability level. The enemy cast polymorph goes from 1.25 seconds at level 1 to 2.25 seconds at level 5, and the bonus attack and movement speed for your allies goes from 3 seconds to 4 seconds. It's important to note that this ability can only be cast on champions. Lulu's ult is Wild Growth. Lulu enlarges a target ally champion or herself for 7 seconds. It grants them bonus health, 40% increased size, and an aura that slows nearby enemies for the entire duration. On activation, nearby enemies around the target are also knocked up for 0.75 seconds. Being granted bonus health is different just to healing. Not only are they healed, but actually they get bonus maximum health as well. This means that if you use your ult on a full HP ally champion, they will still gain the healing. The bonus health that you grant scales with both the ability level and your AP. The amount that nearby enemies are slowed scales simply with the ability level. So, now we know what Lulu's abilities do, But what order should we level them in? Well, Lulu is pretty simple. We will always start off with E. It's the best ability at level 1. It gives you a lot of safety and also quite a bit of damage. Against aggressive pokey laners, it allows you to take good trades by shielding yourself, and against low damage laners, it allows you to take good trades by damaging them even further. Secondly, we will usually go Q. This allows you to continue to poke and take even better trades at level 2, but sometimes, especially into hard engage, or if you're getting a level during a fight, you might want to take W. W gives you a lot of safety by using it on the enemy ADC in lane and taking them out of the fight for 1.25 seconds at level 1. And then which abilities to max is really simple. Max E, then W, then Q. You always want to do it in this order. Your shield strength scales really well with level, and your W, both the polymorph duration and the attack speed duration and the attack speed amount, all scale really well with level as well. So these are just the two abilities that you want to get up there as high as you can straight away. While Q similarly scales fairly well with level itself, your magic damage as Lulu is not particularly useful. Also, the cooldown on your Q doesn't scale with level at all, but it goes from 16 to 12 seconds base cooldown on your W. Now we're going to talk about runes. Runes on Lulu are a bit more complicated than I would suggest on other champions. I've been doing a significant amount of Lulu testing both on and off stream in elos ranging from silver all the way to diamond. I found it quite difficult to really pin down exactly whether I preferred Airy or Guardian on Lulu, and even sometimes wondering whether I should play certain sub-runes as well. I'm going to quickly run over the rune pages for Airy and for Guardian, just so you know exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about Airy versus Guardian, and then we're going to spend a little time making sure that you understand how you should choose between picking Guardian and picking Airy. So when we start off with Airy, obviously we're in the sorcery tree. On line 1, we will take Mana Flow Band. I take this in every single game, and it's for one simple reason. Lulu needs a much healthier mana pool than your standard enchanter because of your ability to use your abilities both offensively and defensively, meaning that there's much more opportunity to effectively use them both for trading and defense and in all sorts of ways. By keeping your mana pool healthy, by having Mana Flow Band, you can spam your abilities a little bit more and you can just really take advantage of every opportunity. Now on line 2, I will usually take Transcendence. Transcendence isn't really useful in lane as it only comes into effect at level 10, but when you get to level 10, you get 10% cooldown reduction. It also gives you a passive that turns excess cooldown reduction into AP. It's just a really great rune. Cooldown reduction is great on Lulu. Like we talked about, there's a lot of times where you can spam abilities and a lot of opportunities to use your abilities in distinct ways. So cooldown is just great. In certain lanes, especially lanes where I really want to get ahead early on, Absolute Focus is really good. It activates immediately, but it's a bit less consistent than Transcendence because it activates only when you're above 70% HP. This makes it a typically early game lane focused rune. And then on the final line, I will pretty much always take Scorch. Scorch is a great laning rune, especially for somebody like Lulu who can be quite a bit of an annoyance and you can do quite a lot of easy trades and regular poking. Scorch has a very low 10-second cooldown and it does damage every time you hit an enemy with an ability. This means on a champion like Lulu where you're going to want to poke a lot and you're going to want to just do a lot of regular damage, Scorch really helps. Gathering Storm is an option. It gives you great scaling AP, but you don't really have the same kind of AP scaling ratios as you do on other enchanters when you're playing Lulu. And I find that Gathering Storm is a little less useful on Lulu than it is on, say, a Soraka or maybe a Yuumi. For that reason, I personally take Scorch whenever I take Airy now. And for our secondaries, we're going to pick the Inspiration Tree. Inside this, we're going to take Biscuits and we're going to take Cosmic Insight. Cosmic Insight is just awesome. It gives you Summoner Spell cooldown reduction, as well as immediately giving you 5% ability cooldown reduction. And then on top of that, it also gives you 5% max cooldown reduction. All of these are just really great on Lulu, who, like we've said, just really loves cooldown reduction. And combining them with Biscuits, it really solves all of your early game mana issues when you've got Airy. Now for your Guardian page. Obviously, when we take Guardian, we're in the Resolve tree. On line 1, every single game, I will take Font of Life. Font of Life is a great rune for you and your ADC and into the late game for your entire team. It allows you and your allies to heal whenever you attack somebody whose movement you have impaired. Considering that you have a slow on your Q, hard CC on your W, and a slow and a knock-up on your ult as well, it means that you can proc this very regularly, giving your allies sustain when they would have had none. Now on line 2, we'll usually take Bone Plating. Bone Plating is a great rune, especially into hard engage supports. Bone Plating has a relatively long cooldown, but when it's off cooldown, once you're attacked, the next free attack attacks do reduced damage. It's important to note that the attack that triggers this rune won't get its damage reduced, so this is relatively bad into heavy poke lanes where you're going to be getting hit a lot by just one ability or attack, such as say an Ezreal or a Caitlyn or a Senna. You're going to want to consider Second Wind. Second Wind heals you after you take damage from an enemy champion. The healing occurs over 10 seconds and it scales with your missing health. This means into lanes that are poking you a lot and whose win condition relies on whittling you down so that you are unable to fight yourself. Second Wind can be really strong. Second Wind has no cooldown, and if you're attacked within the 10 seconds while the previous Second Wind was active and healing you, then the duration is simply refreshed. And on our final line, we're always going to take Revitalize. Revitalize increases your heal and shield power by 5%. This applies to both incoming and outgoing shields and heals, and the effect is increased to 10% on targets below 40% HP. Due to the amount of heals and shields that you have in your kit, this is a must-have. And our secondaries on the Guardian tree will be exactly the same as for Aerie. We'll take the Inspiration tree with Biscuits and Cosmic Insight. The reasons for this are exactly the same, so I'm not going to go over them again. So how do we choose between Aerie or Guardian? Well, first, let's have a look at what each one allows us to accomplish. To start off, Aerie gives us a higher damage output. Not only does Aerie itself do damage, but also it gives us access to the Scorch rune, which adds to this damage even more. On top of this, with Mana Flow Band, you can use your abilities more offensively because you have a much more healthy mana pool, and you don't really need to worry about spamming your abilities quite as much as with Guardian. Aerie also scales better. The use of Transcendence allows you to hit your max cooldown quicker, and if you exceed this, then it even gives you a little bit of AP. On top of this, Aerie is more useful into the mid and late game in team fights because Aerie has a much lower cooldown than Guardian. This means that it can be reapplied many times in a team fight, but Guardian will be procced and probably won't be off cooldown by the time the fight is over. Guardian, on the other hand, gives us much more defense. If you're engaged upon and it procs, then both you and your ally are shielded. And even after the nerfs, the shielding is quite significant. Also gives us access to defensive runes such as Bone Plating, Font of Life, Second Wind, Revitalize. These are all really good defensive runes. Like we said, however, Guardian has a very high cooldown, so it will give us far better defense in trades, as long as the trades aren't happening too commonly and Guardian isn't on cooldown. Now we're going to look at some scenarios so that you can understand what this means and how to apply it to your decision making when you're in champion select. We'll start off with the easiest choice in my opinion, and that is the enemy has picked a hard engaged support. In this scenario, I will always take Guardian. Almost all hard engaged supports have very long cooldowns. They don't typically want to fight often, but they want to kill you when they do fight. This means that Guardian and Bone Plating can be a total lifesaver, and once their burst of CC is over, you've often got the upper hand and you can turn on them and attempt to kill them with your ally. It's so effective at shutting down what the hard engaged supports are trying to accomplish on you that it's incredibly powerful. If, however, the enemy doesn't have a hard engaged support, things get a little more complicated. With the other types of supports, such as pokey mid lane mages, sustain focused enchanters, or anti-engaged champions like Taric, both Guardian and Aerie will have strengths and pitfalls, and it becomes quite difficult to choose. An example of this is going into heavy poke, such as say a Caitlyn and a Zyra. On the one hand, Guardian seems like a pretty bad pick. They want to do regular damage to you, which makes Bone Plating kind of bad. It also means that they're going to be able to proc your Guardian even when they're not engaging on you, meaning that the shield is often wasted. But there are benefits such as Revitalize and Second Wind, which can help you with your sustain. If we think about Aerie into this same bot lane comp, then we have similar issues. It's much harder to win trades against these oppressive pokey team comps, and that low cooldown on Aerie and Scorch that are really good when you're poking and doing a lot of damage and taking regular short trades isn't that useful, because if you step up a lot of the time, they are just going to outtrade you really easily. We get similar issues with other bot lane comps, including the disengaged champions and the enchanter supports. For this reason, when I try and choose between Aerie and Guardian into a non-hard engaged champion, I more often than not look at my own ADC and choose accordingly. If my ADC is a early game lane bully oppressive champion themselves, such as say a Misfortune or a Lucian, then I'm going to want to pick Aerie, as they want to accomplish a lot of poke and lane bullying. This helps you accomplish that too, which just helps them snowball, and that's one of the most important things that you need to think about when you're trying to synergize with your ADC. I will also take Aerie if I have a very safe ADC. This can include somebody that's very mobile like an Ezreal, or somebody that can farm safely with very long range like a Caitlyn or a Senna. This is because these ADCs are typically safe from being outpoked anyway, and in regards to Caitlyn and Senna, they often have great self-sustain through runes or abilities. If we happen to have a late game hyper carry like a Twitch or a Vayne, or even an Ashe or a Jinx nowadays, then I'm usually going to want to take Guardian. If I feel like we outscale the enemy very hard, then the defensive nature of Guardian is really powerful. If you're Lulu Twitch into an early game team comp, then simply not losing lane is winning lane. You're going to be so strong in the late game, as long as they don't snowball and end early, you're always going to outscale them, and you're always going to have the upper hand in the mid to late game team fights. Therefore, the defensive nature of Guardian and the ability of it to stop them getting fed is incredibly powerful, and it's worth foregoing the potential aggressive nature of Aerie to accomplish this. Also, specifically from a solo queue perspective where you can't always trust your ADCs, when you have this early game lane bully ADC that doesn't scale well into the late, it's nicer to have that Aerie rune set, because like we've talked about, it scales better and it makes you more relevant and it makes you have more of an impact on what's going on. But when you have a hyper carry, especially if you're duo queue with them and you know you can trust them to do well into the mid and late game, how much you're personally scaling doesn't matter so much as your just base ability to peel and buff your ADC. So it's not so important for you to have that late game scaling rune set. Now, let's talk about builds on Lulu. Your first choice, and quite an important one, is which starter item to take. The choice is between Spellthief's Edge and Relic Shield, because obviously we scale with ability power, not attack damage, and it will almost certainly depend on what the enemy, ADC, and support are. Spellthief's Edge offers us more ability power, as well as mana regen, and the ability to farm gold by hitting the enemies with attacks or abilities. Relic Shield, on the other hand, offers us a little bit of AP, but less than Spellthief's Edge, instead giving us a little bit of extra health. Also, instead of mana regen, you get health regen, and instead of farming by hitting the enemy, you farm by CSing minions, which gold you share with your ADC. For me, the choice usually revolves around which one I think I'm going to be able to farm the gold quicker on. As we'll talk about when we talk about full items, you hit some pretty big power spikes on Lulu, and maximizing your early gold farm can be quite important. Therefore, I'm usually looking at whether or not I'm going to be able to hit the enemy safely a lot, allowing me to farm up my Spellthief's Edge very quickly, or if I'm just going to want to sit back, relax, and farm very consistently via minions. Relic Shield is incredibly consistent for this, and if you're having any doubts, then just take Relic Shield. It's almost impossible for them to stop you using it to farm, and especially in the lower elos where your ADC doesn't farm so much, using it to secure every cannon is also a great benefit. The next choice we're going to have to make is boots. Boots are just really good to build early on Lulu. They help your ability to trade in lane effectively, running in, attacking the enemy, doing as much damage as possible, and then getting out while taking the least damage as possible. They're also awesome into skill shot heavy champions, be it a hard engage with a really lethal hook like a Blitzcrank, or a mage with really long CC like a Morgana. That extra movement speed really does help get you out of the way, and once you've dodged those crucial skill shots, you've got a pretty big amount of time where you can go and bully them and harass them and farm your gold item. For this reason, I usually build them immediately or alongside my first item, and the typical choices are cooldown boots or mobility boots. Mobility boots are usually what I'll build. The reason for this is just like on a lot of supports, it allows you to roam around and get vision. As Lulu, you want to be stuck to your ADC as much as possible. Almost your entire kit is based around buffing them. For that reason, mobility boots really help me to go and ward and clear wards while missing the least amount of time with my ADC to buff them, to save them, or to farm up with them. Cooldown boots, however, are a more aggressive option. They're a little cheaper, allowing you to hit your power spikes quicker, and unlike mobility boots, they don't lose any movement speed in combat, which makes them even better for taking trades in lane and fighting. Also, the extra cooldown reduction is really great, and these are probably the best boots if you've got a really good hyper carry that you can trust, because you can just use more buffing spells on them more often. In solo queue, where you can't trust them so much and you also can't trust that they're going to come with you to ward, mobility boots are probably the best bet. Of course, as usual, if the enemy has a full AD comp or a full AP comp, or an absolute ton of CC, then you should be looking towards Ninja Tabbies into the full AD comps, or Merc Treads into full AP comps or CC. These defensive options really shut down the enemy's ability to kill you, and even though you're going to be playing Lulu and you're going to be playing relatively safe and in the backlines, just buffing up your ADC, the more you can survive, the better. And it really is worthwhile choosing these boot options when the enemies have these team comps that are really hindered by it. Now let's talk about your core items on Lulu. Number one, and the item I build first in almost every single game, is Ardent Sensor. Ardent Sensor is a supporting item that grants you AP, cooldown reduction, increased heal and shield power, movement speed, and mana regen. All of these base stats are really great on Lulu, especially the mana regen and the AP, which you can really use in lane to bully more. But of course, the real reason to build this item is its passive. Ardent Sensor's passive allows outgoing healing and shielding to enhance your allies. This enhancement is called Frenzy. It lasts for 6 seconds and it gives your ally 10 to 30% bonus attack speed, scaling with your ally's level, and it also gives them 5 to 20 bonus on-hit magic damage, again depending on your target's level. This increased attack speed and bonus on-hit damage works really well with pretty much any ADC. When you combine that with the fact that you're playing around attack speed because of your W, and that you have so much shielding and healing in your kit, it makes this item just really great, and that's why I'll build it first in almost every game. Our next core item is a Fiend's Unholy Grail. Grail is a support item that gives you AP, cooldown reduction, magic resist, and 100% base mana regen. Like we've talked about, cooldown reduction, mana regen, and ability power are all great, and the magic resist is usually pretty good on bot lane because most supports have at least some magic damage. Grail also has 2 passives, both of which are super useful. Firstly, you get 5 ability power for every additional 25% base mana regen that you have. This is an absolutely huge benefit because most of the support items, and if you build Spellthiever's Edge, even your starter item, are giving you base mana regen at the moment. This means that you can actually get quite a significant amount of ability power. In fact, Grail itself procs this 4 times to give you an extra 20 ability power. So technically, Grail is a 50 ability power item on its own. If you have a fully stacked Spellthiever's Edge and an Ardent Sensor already, you have another 6 procs of this for another 30 ability power, meaning that you will gain 80 ability power, 10% cooldown reduction, 100% base mana regen, and 30 magic resist, plus the passive that we're going to talk about in a second, all for just 2,100 gold. It's an absolutely insanely valuable item, and that's before we even talk about the next passive. And this next passive is one that allows you to store your damage as stacks on the item. The amount of stacks that you can store depend on your level, going from 100 at level 1 to 250 at level 18, and then when you heal or shield an ally, it will consume these charges to heal on a 1-to-1 ratio. Therefore, if you shield somebody for 100, it will consume 100 charges and heal them for 100 as well. This adds extra healing into your kit, which is mostly shield focused, which is awesome, and also helps for sustain in a different manner. Overall, I think Grail is one of the most powerful items in the game right now, just given its price to performance ratio, and I think it's something that you should be thinking about building in literally every game. Now let's talk about Lulu's situational items. First up is Redemption. Redemption gives you cooldown reduction, health regen, and a further 10% heal and shield power. It also gives you 150% base mana regen, which means another 30 AP if you have a Fiend's Unholy Grail. It also has an active ability that allows you to create a huge zone on the ground at a maximum range of 5,500 units, which is extremely far. The entire zone is revealed and then loads up. After it's finished channeling, all allies are healed, while enemy champions take 10% of their maximum health as true damage. The healing for your allied champions is affected by 3 times your heal power, and this effect can be used while you're dead as well. Redemption is mostly useful in games where you want to team fight a lot. So if you're noticing a lot of team fights going down, if you're contesting a lot of dragons or barons, or if you've just got a team comp that is suited to big team fights rather than split pushing or getting picks, then you're gonna want to be looking towards Redemption. Our next situational item is Zeke's Convergence. Zeke's is a defensive item that offers you armor, cooldown reduction, magic resist, and mana. It also has an active ability that allows you to bind to a conduit. Typically, this is going to be your ADC because they're the ones that you're going to be supporting for most of the game, but you are able to change who your conduit is. Once bound to a conduit, casting your ultimate ability within their range will give both you and your conduit a buff. Your conduit will get empowered basic attacks. These basic attacks will burn their target with fire, dealing 30% bonus magic damage over 2 seconds. This is really strong with most ADCs. I find it's specifically awesome with a Twitch. If they've built Hurricane as their second or third item and they're using their ult to just plow through the entire enemy team, as soon as you ult them, they gain this bonus magic damage on hit, and it just works really well for them. Likewise, it can also work really well if you have an ADC that builds Ginsu's Rageblade, such as Kai'Sa or Val. Varus. Your buff covers you in frost with a 300 range. All enemies in this 300 range diameter around you are slowed by 20%. If your conduit basic attacks somebody that's in this frost and applies their fire burn, the enemy gets a frost fire covenant. This deals 40 magic damage per second to all nearby enemies and slows them by 40% instead of 20%. Now on Lulu, often you don't want to be in the middle of the enemy team, so you're not going to get the most use out of the frost fire combo, but it can actually be quite strong if they've got people that are diving into the back lines and trying to get onto you and your ADC. Regardless of that fact though, especially like I said with a Twitch, simply the on-hit magic damage can make it worthwhile to build Zeke's, and it's also just a great item if you're having trouble with an enemy assassin and you need some armor, because it's 60 armor which can really help to shut down their ability to one-shot you. Our next situational item is Knight's Vow. Knight's Vow is another defensive item with a very similar passive to Zeke's in fact. Its base stats give you armor, cooldown reduction, and health, which is actually very rare for a support item to give you health, so this is quite good. Its active allows you to bind to a partner, and if you're near your partner, you gain an additional 20 armor and 15% bonus movement speed while moving toward them. Also, when you're within 1000 range of your partner, you heal for 6% of all of the damage that your ally does to enemy champions, and you redirect 6% of all the damage that your ally takes from enemy champions to you. The damage that you receive is true damage because it takes into account your allies' resistances and reductions, not your own. Now, this can be a pretty risky support item when you're playing such a squishy champion like Lulu. Obviously, you're going to be taking a lot more damage now. However, when you're playing with a high damage output ADC, again, we're talking about hyper carries like Twitch or Kog'Maw, who are going to be building Hurricane at some point and just doing a huge amount of damage to the entire enemy team, then the amount of healing that you get is actually phenomenal, and it usually totally outweighs the amount of damage they're taking by the time you get to the late game. I find that this item is exceptional when the enemy has a fed assassin. If they have somebody like a Zed or a Talon who's jumping into the backline and deleting either you or your ADC, Knight's Vow can be a total lifesaver. Firstly, for you, when you're with your ADC, you have 60 extra armor and 250 more health, which will pretty much stop any assassin one-shotting you unless they are super fed. And then for your ADC, they're taking 6% less damage because it's being redirected to you, and once again that can really help keep them alive. Next we have Mikhail's Crucible. Mikhail's gives you cooldown reduction, magic resist, and once again 100% base mana regen. It also gives you plus 20% heal and shield power. It has a unique passive called Harmony. You gain 25% base health regen for every additional 25% base mana regen. However, if you have decided to build a Fiend's Unholy Grail before this, the Fiend's Unholy Grail passive Dissonance disables all Harmony passives on any other item. Mikhail's also has a unique active ability. It removes all stuns, suspensions, roots, taunts, fears, charms, silences, drowsiness, sleepiness, cripples, and slows, as well as granting them 2 seconds of slow immunity, and if you are to successfully cleanse an effect, the target will get 40% bonus movement speed for 2 seconds. The active has a 120 second cooldown, and it can be cast on both yourself and allies. Mikhail's can be quite hard to use. It has a very long cooldown, and if you blow it incorrectly, then it's completely useless for a while, but it is extremely cheap at just 200 gold, and the ability to cleanse these disables from your ADC is absolutely massive. One of the big killers of ADCs is just getting locked down and not being able to attack, especially those that build a lot of lifesteal. So if you can get used to using this properly, it's a total game changer. It's important to note that there are a few things that you cannot cleanse with Mikhail's. These include knockups and groundings, blinds and suppressions, disarms, and nearsightedness. And our final situational item is Locket of the Iron Solari. Once again, this is a defensive item. It offers you 60 magic resist and 30 armor. It has an active ability that grants a decaying shield to nearby allied champions and yourself for up to 2.5 seconds. This can be really great if you're playing in a big teamfight comp, if you've already bought Redemption and you really want to add to that full team peel kind of playstyle that you might be playing around. It's also great if the enemy has a lot of AP damage dealers, because obviously it gives you much more magic resist than you would get on, say, Zeke's. However, it doesn't offer you cooldown reduction, and usually when you're playing Lulu, you're trying to pocket a specific champion and buff them, whereas this is much more of a team-wide type of option, so it's incredibly niche for me. That said, when we are team fighting a lot and I feel like I'm getting a huge amount of use out of my Redemption, then Locket is a great pick. It's also worth noting that because you're giving everybody shields, you're applying Ardent Sensor to everybody, which can be another great little thing about this. And now we're done with builds. In part 2 of this video, we're going to get really in depth into how to play Lulu depending on who your ADC is, and really talk about how to play the Lulu Twitch, Lulu Kog'Maw, or Lulu Vayne bot lanes that are so popular right now. We're also going to talk about the little tips and tricks that are really going to help you master Lulu in any scenario. So hit subscribe if you want to make sure you catch that, and thank you very much for watching.